From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. We start in Russia, where Vladimir Putin was sworn in as president for a fourth term. He will remain in office for 6 more years after being re-elected in March. Putin took oath in front of some 5,000 guests who attended the ceremony at the Kremlin Hall. The president pledged to harness the country's talents to achieve breakthroughs and vowed he will improve people's living standards by boosting the economy. He also said Russia will cooperate with other states in the interest of peace and stability.
We must use all the opportunities available, first of all, to reach the most essential development goals for the economic, technology breakthrough, for raising competitive ability in those spheres which determine the future, and new quality of life, and well-being, security and health of a person are the most important. These are the issues at the center of our policy. We stand for an equal and mutually beneficial cooperation with all states in the interest of peace and stability on our planet. Russia is a strong, active and influential participant in the international life.
Putin was re-elected with more than 70% of the vote. Back in March, more than 30,000 people gathered near the Kremlin on election day to cheer and support the newly elected president. Supporters also enjoyed an open-air concert celebrating the 4th anniversary of Crimea's annexation.
I think that today is an extraordinary day, a very important day for Russia. The people expressed their will during the presidential election in March, and today we have the legal part, the inauguration. And for another 6 years, he will be our president.
If a leader defends his country's interests and let him govern until the end of his days, there is absolutely no need in our country for the likes of Gorbachev. Let them go to the West and stay there.
Voting centers in Venezuela opened on Sunday as the National Electoral Council tested the country's electoral system ahead of the May 20th election.
500 voting centers opened from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. so that election staff, inspectors, and voters could rehearse for a seamless process ahead of the big day. The operation included a total of 1,142 voting machines. Voters were lined up at polling stations across the country.
I think that everyone has to go out and vote in order to guarantee democracy, because we're facing an economic war that has us suffocated. But despite that, we have to trust that everything will come out fine.
May 20th, excellent, in peace and tranquility, and in democracy, because we have democracy. This is a process which is completely democratic.
The voting system in Venezuela is a fully automated process and can be audited throughout all of its phases. Simulation voting centers were located in 335 municipalities in each of the 24 Venezuelan states.
So tell me something. After 21 to 22 elections, you already know how to vote. Is that right?
Well, we already know how to do this with our eyes closed, but this information is always good to have because there are people, for example, older citizens, who are more likely to make mistakes.
As well as new voters who are just getting into voting. This helps them get to know the voting system so that they know how to vote, how to use the machine in order to cast their vote. It always involves informing the citizen, more than anything.
President and incumbent Nicolas Maduro himself participated in the mock vote, attending a polling center in Caracas. His visit to the polling center ended with an invitation for all to support the upcoming election. The day marked the 2-week countdown for what Venezuela's CNE expects to be a successful and smooth election day come May 20th.
After participating in the mock election, President Maduro explained how the system works. Maduro stressed that the Venezuelan electoral system has a fingerprint verification that makes it unique. He also said it is the most audited system in the world. His visit to the voting center ended with an invitation for all to support the upcoming election. Following the voting walkthrough, Maduro sat down with his communications minister, Jorge Rodriguez, and other top officials present at the election simulation.
I'm casting and immediately proceed to the electoral box, known as the ballot box, and I deposit my physical vote, which I had cast electronically, into this electoral box, just as in any country in the world. Venezuela has presidential elections on May 20th. I invite you to vote, and I invite the entire world to support the elections in Venezuela.
Our correspondent Ian Bruce was at the Fermín Toro voting center in Caracas and sends us this report.
Since 8 o'clock in the morning, people have been queuing up here at the Fermín Toro voting center in Caracas. In total, there are 500 voting centers open for this dress rehearsal today across Venezuela. That's 1,200 voting stations, because each voting center has 2 or 3 mesas, as they call them in Spanish. Now, the purpose of this dress rehearsal is both to show that the voting process itself is trustworthy and robust, and also to teach people to familiarize people with the voting process. They're given a sheet like this. But of course, after more than 20 elections during the Bolivarian Revolution, many people really don't need to be taught how to vote. Let's go inside and see how it works. The voters queue up here, and as they come in, they move first to this table here, where they present their identity card to check that they are registered to vote at this voting center. That also checks that they haven't voted, that nobody has voted with that identity card before. Then they put their fingers, a thumb, onto the machine, which takes their thumbprint, and that is checked against the database as well. So that's checked against the identity card to make sure it's the same person, and also that the thumbprint hasn't been registered as voting already. Then they go to the voting station, which we can't see the actual voting machine itself. For security reasons, we're not allowed to do that. But it's a touch screen. There's a list of the candidates which they choose from. It comes up on the screen saying, do you want to confirm that vote or not? They press that, and then once they've confirmed their vote, it prints out a paper register of their vote, and then they move on to the next machine. Now, this has been described by Jimmy Carter in 2012. The authorities here are fond of reminding us of this. It was described as, of the 92 elections that the Carter Center had monitored, Jimmy Carter said the Venezuelan process was the most reliable. This paper ballot is then like a double check, which is then later audited to make sure it tallies with the electronic voting record. And finally, they come over to this table and they put their thumbprint there, and they get indelible ink on their finger to show that they voted. Another safeguard. So all in all, this is the way the process works in Venezuela. They're just finishing there. This is the way the process works in Venezuela, and it really does seem to be a pretty robust election system, which is almost completely fraud-free and in basically fraud-proof.
And earlier we also spoke with Jean-Pierre Anaya, an economist and professor at Universidad Bolivariana de Venezuela, about the election process in Venezuela and how it compares to others.
Especially in European countries and another Latin American countries. Yeah, first of all, we have a completely automated counting system, but it doesn't mean it's not checked up by humans. The system is electronically sent to the Electoral Council, where they give the total number at the end of the day. But in every poll, in every station, all the numbers are counted again, because the machine that we use have the electronic vote that you push a button, and this is the electronic voting machine, and then that prints a paper. At the end of the election, the member of the election center, they count again, and they check that the number the computer is giving, it's accurate. So all the parties that have sent members to the electoral centers, they can check the sum that the electoral council is giving at the end of the night.
We go to Colombia, where talks between the government and the ELN are due to begin in Havana, Cuba next week. The announcement comes after a meeting in Venezuela was held to discuss the next move. Talks had been taking place in Quito, Ecuador, but Ecuadorian President Lenín Moreno eventually pulled out, citing tensions on the border with Colombia. The talks between the ELN and the Colombian government will focus on the creation of a new ceasefire agreement. Former Uruguayan President José Pepe Mujica wrote a letter to the leader of the Common Alternative Revolutionary Forces, FARC, Jesús Santrich, who is still in jail and on hunger strike since April 9th. In the letter delivered to the delegation of the FARC, Mujica tells Santrich, "Not all is won, but not all is lost. The fight for peace is still alive and continues fighting. In reality, it is for a new Colombia. I ask you to have faith in life and in those who fight for the oppressed." We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Nicaragua, members of the Commission for Truth have been sworn in by the country's National Assembly. Their members are set to investigate the deaths left during the protest that took over the country in the past weeks. The commission is formed by 5 members who have a 3-month deadline to submit a report on the investigation. Demonstrations sparked on April 18th to protest a reform to the social security system proposed by the government of Daniel Ortega. The government later withdrew the proposal and called for a dialogue with the private sector in an attempt to return to peace. But despite the peace efforts, violence continues in the country. According to a local news outlet, Canal 4, right-wing groups threw stones and mortars at families in the cities of Niki, Nohomo, and Catarina last night. The families were praying during a vigil for peace when they were attacked by these groups. Criticism has sparked against Chile's government after 3 Mapuche leaders were sentenced to prison under the anti-terrorism law. Human rights organizations have called to the state to stop criminalizing indigenous Mapuche people. Amnesty International, head of the Americas, criticized the judicial process and urged the authorities to investigate alleged irregularities in the trial in which the 3 Mapuche have been convicted as terrorists. Machi Francisca Liconao and other 7 Mapuche were acquitted. The National Fair of the Agrarian Reform in Brazil, organized by the landless workers movement, enjoyed its final day on Sunday. The fair offered more than 330 tons of food without pesticides, and more than 900 rural producers participated in the production of the food offered at the fair. Besides selling healthy food, the fair has also presented various social activities and seminars throughout the weekend. Via the agrarian reform, workers are looking for greater social equality, a better distribution of political power, and economic improvements. Honduras is in the midst of a water crisis that has left more than 30% of the inhabitants of the capital without water. Our correspondent Gilda Silvestrucci has the story.
Drinking water every 6 days. This despite the National Service of Aqueduct and Suez has been privatizing water in some areas, apparently to improve service. Most people say the situation has worsened.
There is no water. There has never been. It's fine if they privatize certain things, but services need to work 24 hours a day. Not only for some hours or for certain periods of time. There's an infinite number of rivers in this country.
There are only 2 dams in the capital, while the population in remote areas in the last 20 years has grown more than 50%. The supply does not meet the demand for water.
The growth of the capital has been outside the distribution network. That is where we provide water primarily by tank trucks, which reach a lot of people.
Tegucigalpa has more than 2 million inhabitants and only one zone where water is generated. The rest depends on the rainy season, which sometimes takes a long time to reach those places.
During the months when it doesn't rain, a huge amount of water is dammed, 46 million cubic meters. The Picacho wellspring gives us water during these months, from November to May, which is 7 months.
The population disagree with rationing hours. Meanwhile, their bills at the end of the month are unchanged.
They keep on telling us that the dams are ready, but that's all they say. We are in need of water. Look down there, we need water.
In the remote communities of the capital, the citizens buy water tanks for up to $50. Some say more than 200 neighborhoods are living without water.
Barbados Labour Party officially launched its campaign for the May 24th general election Saturday. More than 20,000 people joined campaign liftoff, jam-packed with entertainment and fiery speeches. The BLP said it would cut out wastage, stamp out corruption, and reprioritize the country's expenditure. Opposition leader Mia Mottley promised civil servants who have been pushing for a salary increase for almost 2 years that she would be meeting with the trade unions shortly after taking office to discuss this issue. She also revealed that if it is determined that an increase cannot be immediately afforded, a living allowance would be provided.
We labor in a great cause, in the cause of Barbados, in the cause of bringing a country back after a lost decade, is what has given us the solace and the inspiration to walk. But you have replenished us every step of the way.
In Bolivia's capital city, La Paz, beauty contests have been banned. The aim is to reduce the objectification of women and girls and also reduce sexual abuse. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, brings us the story.
For protecting the sexual integrity for girls, boys, and teenagers, bans, among other things, fashion and beauty shows that involve children.
The early hypersexualization, that is to say, pushing girls to participate in beauty contests or using boys and girls to sell fashion brands, is objectifying them and turning them into commodities to be consumed.
The new rule bans the portraying of children as adults to promote sexuality or merchandise.
Quite often we see in the streets big ads with controversial pictures, like hypersexualized girls or boys dressed as, let's say, little adults. All of these messages are dangerous for our society and our values.
It has been proven that kids taking on adult roles are exposed to all kinds of risks. Also, when pictures of them are published in social media or when they have to perform in public.
This year we have arrested the man who used to record the private parts of little girls. He had everything in his camera and used the pictures to make pornographic videos. Parents are sometimes unaware of these risks.
This law says that all public activity where children are going to take part must be approved by the municipality in order to avoid the risk of traumatic experiences for the children and their parents.
For instance, teenagers that want to be a Miss Teenager have ended up with bulimia disorders because they wish to be skinny, also anorexia. All this sexual objectification has consequences because it gives more value to the sexual over other values such as love, respect, and self-care.
The main tool is, as usual, education. The law will alert parents to the risk of early hypersexualization of their children. City officials, business, and the entertainment industry will also be advised on the issue.
Since 2011, the National Commission of Small Businesses of El Salvador have been supporting a group of entrepreneurial women who are making products for the national and international markets.
The WAYA project began in 2014, an economic initiative led by Angela and her two daughters, using organically cultivated plants such as stevia, hibiscus, and moringa. They have created preventative health products and natural cosmetics as part of the National Women and Business Program.
The program has helped me to make a business plan, a business profile, and get trained on how to calculate the production cost and focus on the international market. So I'm very grateful.
25 businesses led by women took part in a business conference promoted by the Salvadorian government, where they offered their products and services to banks, supermarket chains, universities, and hotels.
What we want is to have innovative products, products that are accessible and meet demand.
The services being offered are information and communication technology, transport, lodging, and extreme sports, and also textiles, furniture, coffee, and honey.
We want to encourage women leaders to build their capacity to negotiate by themselves, because often they don't have the opportunity to go to a big company and make an appointment. So we want to be the bridge between the big company and these women who have these products, who deserve a chance.
Since the program began in 2011, it has supported more than 38,000 women who receive advice in legal procedures, brand registration, barcodes, and labeling. 700 entrepreneurs have been helped, and they are now contributing to the national economy.
Brazil is getting ready for the World Cup. Soccer fans built a mosaic of the Brazilian flag and the World Cup trophy to send a message of support to the national team ahead of the 2018 World Cup in Russia. A group of 176 supporters descended from a 28 meters high bridge, each holding a cardboard section of Brazil's flag. This was also an attempt to set a record for the world's biggest mosaic. And Mexico has revived its pre-Columbian Mesoamerican ball game. The national championship for the Mesoamerican ball game was celebrated this weekend to close to Teotihuacan, an archaeological site outside the Mexico City. Teams came from all over the country and from abroad to play the sport that dates back to 1400 BC. Teams have to keep a rubber ball in play by knocking it from the hips towards the other team. The opposing team wins a point if the ball is not kept in play. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Lebanon is awaiting official results of the country's first parliamentary elections in almost a decade. The final results are expected to be announced during a news conference on Monday, but an official report indicated that Western-backed Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri would be the winner. The parliamentary election was held under a complex new law that redrew constituency boundaries and changed the electoral system.
The future of Lebanon is the result of the elections. I believe this result is a representation of our country. The previous elections were not good politically nor economically. Now we're optimistic and hopeful that the newly elected will keep their promises.
More than 500 migrants have been saved in separate operations on the Mediterranean Sea. Here's more and other stories making headlines from around the world.
On Sunday in their first free municipal elections since the Arab Spring. Technically, they voted in parliamentary and presidential elections after the fall of dictator Zine El Abidine bin Ali in 2011, but municipal polls have been delayed 4 times since then due to administrative and political deadlocks. The Islamist Ennahda and secular Nida Tunis parties, which form a coalition at the national level, are expected to dominate the polls in 350 municipalities.
Our hope today is to see the situation improve with regards to a wide range of different topics such as cleanliness, illegal buildings, garbage, future plans, and so on. We want municipalities to organize our lives better.
Flash floods due to heavy rain have caused havoc in the Turkish capital Ankara and injured at least 6 people. Dramatic footage showed drivers trying to escape their vehicles and several cars being swept down the street by flood waters in one of the capital's neighborhoods. The floods damaged around 160 cars and over 24 buildings.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet.